civilians in Ukraine flee the violence. The United Nations now estimates that more than 2 million refugees have left their homes. Almost half of them are children.
And as Ukrainian men are mandated now to stay behind to fight, thousands of those Ukrainian families are fighting for their lives as they continue to flee to safer ground. ABC News foreign correspondent Maggie Rulli just crossed the border today from Poland into Ukraine. She is in Lviv right now with more. Maggie, bring us up to date on Poland's government now announcing it is ready to immediately hand over these fighter jets for the air campaign in Ukraine. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Kira, this is major news. It came out just moments ago. The Polish government announcing that they said they're willing and ready to immediately hand over all of their MiG-29 fighter jets to the U.S. And they're asking the U.S. to then backfill those aircraft in Poland. The idea behind all of this is that those MiG-29 jets would eventually likely end up in the hands of Ukrainians. This would be major if this were to happen, Kira. So far, though, a spokesperson for the U.S., a senior Defense Department official, is saying they're aware of that Polish request, but they have nothing yet to add. So we're still digging into this more.
Because the air war there absolutely critical and really a surprise. Everybody thought that Russia's might in the air would smash down the Ukrainian Air Force, and they are still contesting the airspace over Ukraine. It's one of the surprises of this war. But let's get back down to the ground, Maggie. With the women and children, the now millions of people who have fled Ukraine, you were there. As you're just arrived, what went through your heart? What did you see? What did you hear?
Terry, it's such a good point, because as we're debating, what's happening between these governments and their armies, it's the people in all of these countries that are being affected. You mentioned women and children. That's what was just so stark, Terry. And we just crossed over into Ukraine this morning, and coming the other way were thousands of people, almost all of them women and children. And we've heard the numbers. We know there's 1 million children that have become refugees, 2 million people, but seeing it in person, it's hard to even put into words, Terry and Kira. And again, seeing all of those women and children, some of the most vulnerable of our population, many of these families waiting for days to cross the border, multiple children hanging off of their mothers. It was emotional. But I also want to point out what also moved me was what happened as we crossed the border. On the Polish side, we saw just lines of strollers lined up in front of a tent, Polish moms who came out knowing what those Ukrainian mothers were going to need on the other side. And I know we've talked about this in the show already. It's International Women's Day. It was hard not to feel that moment. On one side, these vulnerable women, their bravery, risking everything for their families in Ukraine. On the other side, Polish women stepping up to help other women. It was incredible, Terry and Kira.
Well, and Maggie, as you know, our Phil Lipoff was there for weeks, and now you're there, and it's just, you're the perfect person to tell these stories. Phil really got in and talked with the families, talked as a dad. You are one of our best correspondents when it comes to really delving into the personal side of these types of crises. So talk about I know you haven't been there long yet, but I know you are in for the long haul. Some of the dire needs that you have witnessed thus far that these refugees are facing.
Kira, it's so hard not to just immediately feel so much for everyone that you meet here, because the needs are great. Again, many people waiting for days with families, with children. I mean, think of those needs for little kids, things like diapers and formula and food. We saw people sort of making makeshift communities around fireplaces as they wait to cross the border. They are in this for many days trying to come together. And we caught up with a spokesperson for UNICEF, and what he said really spoke to me. In their history, he said they've never seen a refugee crisis like this with children. The speed and the scope with what this refugee crisis is growing is something that's unprecedented in the history of UNICEF. More than 1 million children refugees in less than 2 weeks. And when you see it on the ground, you just realize what a great need there is and how much that need is going to continue to grow, guys.
Well, we also know when need like that is in abundance. There's so many people that pitch in and give back across the world.
And that's what we're seeing. That is what we're seeing, as Maggie just told us with those strollers. It was a great aspect of a very tough situation. Maggie, thanks for being there, and we'll see you, I'm sure, quite a bit down the road.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the